I wish to discuss the Dalai Lama, who is very well respected in many circles, but not by me. That's not to say he's a bad man. I'm sure if I met him, I'd find him delightful. He's a good politician, he understands the power of public relations, and no doubt there are many Tibetan people, both in China and in exile, who broadly agree with his position. But let's take a step back and look at the history of the Dalai Lama. Anyone who has studied Tibet will realize that Tibetan people under the Dalai Lama lived lives of abject poverty. Now, they may or may not have been happy. I myself would prefer to live to 60 or 70 or 80 rather than die in my mid-30s. The Dalai Lama presided over a feudal regime, no doubt extremely picturesque. I'm sure Heinrich Harrer enjoyed his time in Tibet immensely as a privileged Westerner and a tutor to the obviously very intelligent Dalai Lama. But the average Tibetan was not so lucky. They had their customs and culture. They were nomadic herdsmen and lived very simple lives, put up with extremely harsh conditions. To a certain extent, that's still true. But generally speaking, the average Tibetan today under Chinese rule lives a lot longer than they used to, has access to better healthcare, better food, and lives a longer life. And these facts cannot be denied. Now, for me, I have a problem with the Dalai Lama because, first of all, he receives funding from the United States, in particular the CIA, who see him as a useful ally against China. The Dalai Lama, although he claims to be a man of peace, has never specifically condemned the Gulf War. He's never condemned the Afghanistan invasion. He's never condemned the Iraq War, which was obviously unjust. And the Dalai Lama seems to have no position on the 9/11 fraud, which was definitely not done by Muslims. So the question is, if the Dalai Lama was truly a man of peace, why does he support America's foreign policy? Why doesn't he come out and speak out against America's use of force and violence in the attacks America is making today on countries such as Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, Somalia, Iran, and Pakistan, and attempts to destabilize and overthrow countries such as Cuba, Venezuela, and so on? This, for me, means that the Dalai Lama, despite having superb public relations skills and being incredibly popular amongst Hollywood celebrities and among the New Age movement, lacks credibility. People who truly believe in peace, such as genuine Buddhists, would not support the Iraq War, would not support the Afghanistan War, would realize that 9/11 was an inside job. When I see the Dalai Lama jet-setting around the world, meeting celebrities and heads of state, such as George Bush and Tony Blair, and attempting to win over the public opinion using his charm, I feel a bit sick because, he's not taking the hard choices. So this is let me say to the Dalai Lama this. I think that Chinese people of all descriptions, including Tibetans, can live in one country. I don't see the need for additional countries. We've seen what a great failure Kosovo has been. We've seen what a gigantic failure Eritrea has been. We've seen what a great failure East Timor has been. None of these countries, we were told that, once the so-called colonial yoke was thrown off, it would all be fine. As a matter of fact, East Timorese continue to flee from East Timor. Eritreans continue to leave East Eritrea. And Kosovans continue to seek asylum in Western Europe, despite having the West create a country on their behalf. So we see, and I have no reason to believe that the Tibetan people, I'm sure none of them are coming back from India or from overseas. Once the Dalai Lama, if the Dalai Lama ever does succeed, and I frankly doubt it, I think China is far too strong, but assuming that the Dalai Lama did in fact manage to regain his lordship over Tibet, and reinstitute his rule, I don't think it would take very long for people's lives to sort of get worse. And once the celebrity issue was worn off, I think people would be very disappointed that the average Tibetan person is no better off than before. And this is what I really do think is the true reason why we like the Dalai Lama. I think the reason Westerners like him is this. We want Asia to be poor and technologically backward, religious, and a great cheap destination for our holidays. It's a kind of a racism to think that Tibetan people don't want computers and cars and insulated homes and modern healthcare. We want Tibet to be very poor. We want them to have a feudal religious society. We don't want them to have train lines or roads or decent hospitals, because when we go there, we want a nice view of monasteries and temples and the mountains, and we don't want cars, getting in the way of our yak shots. So I think there's a lot of racism involved in this. I think the Dalai Lama, in his costume choice, shows a kind of old-fashioned Asia that the West truly likes. We don't want we don't want Asian people to qualify for a highly developed, materialistic Western lifestyle that we insist upon. So anyone who supports the Dalai Lama, that's your choice. But I doubt very much whether you personally would be prepared to give up all your creature comforts and live in a stone hut and die in the mid-30s just so an elderly CIA member can continue to live in luxury. Thank you very much for listening. And I do like Tibet. Bye-bye.